In the spring of 2024, a dive operator working the reef ledges off Key Largo surfaced after a 10-minute descent, held still in the water column, and counted 3 lionfish on the first ledge, 8 on the second, 5 on the third. A fourth ledge that 2 years earlier had held 40 animals now held 5, and 4 of those 5 had open wounds on their flanks, raw and deep enough to expose the tissue underneath. She went back the following week with a camera. She photographed the lesions, sent the images to a marine biologist at Florida International University, and that biologist asked a question nobody in the lionfish removal community had yet said out loud. How many of the lionfish you are seeing this year have those marks? The answer, documented over the following 2 months, is the reason I am here. I'm Tom Marsh, and this is the story of how the most efficient marine invader the Atlantic has ever seen began losing a war. It had been winning for 20 years, not because of anything we planned, and not because of anything we built, because of a pathogen no one released, a bird no one recruited, and a predator complex we nearly drove to extinction and then, by accident, allowed to come back. The lionfish is not from this ocean. It evolved in the Indo-Pacific inside a system of co-evolved predators, parasites, and competitors that kept it in check. Sometime during the 1980s, almost certainly through the aquarium trade, lionfish entered the western Atlantic off the southern coast of Florida. By the early 2000s, they were everywhere. Bermuda to Brazil, the full Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico. The invasion that followed was, without qualification, the clearest case study in invasion biology the Atlantic had ever produced. A lionfish will eat almost any small fish that fits into its mouth, including juveniles of every commercially valuable native species, snapper, grouper, parrotfish. It hunts in open water, slowly herding its small prey into corners with its fanned pectoral fins. A single animal can strip a reef patch of native juveniles in a matter of weeks. What kept marine biologists awake at night was the reproductive arithmetic. A female lionfish reaches sexual maturity in under a year. Once she does, she releases approximately 30,000 eggs every 4 days. Every 4 days, for the rest of her adult life. Applied to a population with no native predators and no native disease, that mathematics produced exactly the trajectory anyone could have predicted. Lionfish densities in Caribbean and Florida waters climbed to levels several times higher than densities in their native Indo-Pacific range. The invader was outperforming the original. By the late 2010s, the estimated economic damage ran into billions of dollars across affected economies. Lost commercial fish, lost dive tourism, lost reef productivity. Florida wildlife agencies, reef conservation organizations, and a small army of recreational spearfishers had been removing tens of thousands of lionfish per year, and none of it was moving the population at the scale that mattered. Now, before I go further, there is a resource I want to point you toward because this story connects to something much larger. The patterns that emerge when marine ecosystems collapse, the specific conditions that allow a recovery to begin, and the cases where human removal programs made the difference, and those where they did not. The full picture of how these recoveries actually work, species by species, pressure by pressure, is laid out in the Rewilding Complete Pack. You will find the link in the description below, and you can also scan the QR code on screen right now. It goes deeper than any single video can take you. And what comes next in this story is precisely the kind of moment that pack was built to explain, because what began showing up in the data in 2024 was not in anyone's management plan. The marine biologists who received the photographs of the wounded lionfish had spent 2 years collecting scattered disease reports, isolated specimens, dispersed observations, the kind of thing that is easy to dismiss as routine injury. What the photographs from those Key Largo dives gave her was something different. This was not one sick fish on one reef. In every site surveyed across a 30-mile stretch of the Florida Keys, lionfish were presenting with the same pattern. Open cutaneous ulcers. Some animals showing lesions deep enough to expose underlying muscle tissue. Many were visibly emaciated, slow to respond to a diver's approach. Several died on the return trip to the boat. The condition itself was not entirely new. Veterinary literature had described cutaneous ulcer disease in captive lionfish held in aquaria for years. What was entirely new was the scale. This was the first documented occurrence of the condition in wild lionfish populations across an extended oceanic area. At the time of writing, the precise cause has not been confirmed. The leading hypothesis involves a bacterial pathogen, possibly from the mycobacterial group that may have existed at low levels in the Atlantic for some time and is now finding a dense, immunologically naive host population through which to spread. Other hypotheses involve viral agents, environmental stressors, or some combination. The research is ongoing. What is not in question is the result. In the study sites examined by the research team, lionfish density was significantly lower than recordings from the same locations 3 years earlier. Not everywhere, not at the same rate in every place, but the direction was unambiguous, downward. A species that had outrun every eradication program and every predator the Atlantic could throw at it, had encountered an enemy it could not see and could not escape. But the disease was only the first of the changes. Here's where the story stops being about a pathogen and starts being about everything else that was already shifting in the background. For 15 years, divers and chefs along the Florida coast asked the same question. If lionfish are everywhere, edible, and reportedly delicious, mild, white flesh, somewhere between snapper and triggerfish, entirely free of the venom that makes their spines dangerous, why haven't we eaten them out of existence? The answer has nothing to do with taste and everything to do with how the fish is caught. Lionfish do not take a hook. They cannot be netted at commercial scale because they live dispersed among coral and ledge structures that nets cannot reach. The only proven method of removing a lionfish is sending a human diver down with a short pole spear. One fish, one diver, one trigger pull, at depths between 40 and 100 feet, with a tank that allows perhaps an hour of bottom time per day. The economics collapse before the biology could. A single diver can spear several dozen lionfish in a day. One live female in spawning condition replaces them all in under a week. Removal tournaments pulled tens of thousands per event, and the population continued rising. One idea from the mid-2010s deserves mention for what it revealed about the limits of that thinking. A handful of dive operators in the Caribbean began spearing lionfish and offering the dying animals at the tip of the spear to passing reef sharks, hoping the sharks would associate lionfish with food, learn to hunt them independently, and become the native predators the ecosystem was missing. The sharks ate the lionfish. That part worked. What also happened, and what stopped the experiments at most sites, was that the sharks began associating divers with food. They started approaching divers aggressively, sometimes surrounding them, sometimes attempting to take fish directly from the spear while the diver still held it. The behavioral change was real, and it was the wrong one. Marine biologists and reputable dive operations opposed hand feeding for exactly this reason. Lionfish removal stayed where it was, one fish, one spear, one at a time, until the disease arrived, and until something else began appearing at the surface. In late spring of 2025, a dive boat captain working from a marina in the Florida Keys noticed something unusual near his slip. A large bird was hunting in the shallow water where dead lionfish speared by divers and thrown overboard sometimes floated. The bird was a bald eagle. Bald eagles are not, by training or by evolutionary history, fishing birds in the way ospreys are. They eat fish, but they are also opportunistic scavengers, famously willing to take whatever food presents itself at the water's surface. Along the entire Florida coast, and dive centers in numbers nobody recorded 30 years ago, what divers and marina workers in the Keys and along the lower Atlantic coast began observing and photographing was bald eagles systematically feeding on lionfish carcasses discarded by spearfishers and, in documented cases, taking sick or dying lionfish from the surface that no human had killed. Lionfish weakened by the ulcer disease tend to rise toward the surface as they die. Bald eagles patrol exactly that surface. To be precise about what this means and what it does not mean, bald eagles are not the primary predator of healthy adult lionfish. There is no peer-reviewed evidence that they hunt lionfish in deep water. What is documented is that eagles are now consistently intercepting lionfish that die at the surface from disease and from spearfishing operations, and that, until very recently, eagles were not present in these numbers near these reefs. The connection to the broader story is the one that underlies every account like this. A native predator that humans had reduced to minimal populations for most of the 20th century came back, and in coming back it found a non-native prey species sick or vulnerable for other reasons that was not present in the landscape when the eagle population originally collapsed. The eagle did not evolve to eat lionfish. The eagle evolved to eat whatever is dying at the surface in front of it. And for the first time, lionfish are beginning to be that thing. The eagles are the most photogenic part of the story, the part that circulates in dive shop conversations and local news. They are not the only part. During that same period, divers across the Caribbean and Florida began quietly documenting an increasing number of native reef predators taking lionfish on their own, not because anyone trained them, but because they worked it out for themselves. Large Nassau grouper in protected waters, where they have been allowed to recover their historical body size, have been documented attacking and consuming adult lionfish. Goliath grouper, one of the largest fish on the Florida coast, capable of reaching 180 kilograms, have been filmed swallowing lionfish whole. Moray eels, during night dives in the Bahamas, have been captured on camera pulling lionfish from their daytime shelters in reef crevices. Even in a handful of cases, small or diseased lionfish were taken by predators that had not previously been recorded hunting them. Some of these predators may be responding to the vulnerability the ulcer disease creates. Some appear to be hunting healthy adults. Researchers are still working out where the line falls. What is unambiguous is that across the Caribbean basin and the Florida coast, more native predator species are appearing in stomach content analyses and direct underwater observation records than at any point since the invasion began. Combined with the disease and the surface-level eagle activity, what is taking shape in 2025 and into 2026 is not a single solution to the lionfish problem. It is a convergence, slow, distributed, and largely accidental. The disease takes the weakest. The eagles recover the dying. The grouper and the moray take what they can reach. The spearfishers and the restaurant economy take what they can sell. And the lionfish, after 20 years of winning according to its own biology, is beginning to lose ground according to the data. This is the point where the story requires honesty about what is not happening. Lionfish have not disappeared. Populations across the Caribbean and Florida remain enormous, and the disease, as of now, has not spread across the full extent of their range. The decline is real in specific locations and across specific years. It is not a population-level collapse. Anyone still working on removal will say exactly that. They are still spearing, they are still finding them. What has changed is more subtle than a collapse and more important than a headline. Throughout the entire history of this invasion, every assessment arrived at roughly the same conclusion: we were losing. On every reef where measurements were being taken, the numbers driven by lionfish biology exceeded the numbers removed by human effort every single year. Now, for the first time in specific sites, the numbers are moving in the other direction. And not because of anything humans designed. A pathogen we did not introduce, a bird we did not recruit, a predator complex we came within a generation of destroying completely, and then largely by accident allowed to return. The same pattern repeats wherever ecologists look. Beavers rebuild wetlands faster than governments can permit it. Black bears locate feral pig nests that $2 million in rodenticide never found. Native predatory fish, returning to reefs from which they were absent for half a century, encounter an invader that has no co-evolved defense against them. And the ecosystem, given time and protection, finds answers that were not written into any management plan. The dive operator from Key Largo still runs her boat. Her clients still want to see fish, and she still finds them in some spots, more native species than she had recorded on those reefs in the previous decade. She still finds lionfish, but fewer, and most of the ones she finds now carry the marks. On a July dive, she surfaced and looked up at the sky above the boat. A bald eagle was perched on a channel marker buoy about 100 meters off the stern. It was watching the water. Her dive partner was tossing the day's speared lionfish overboard. The moment the first carcass touched the surface, the eagle left the buoy and hit the fish in under 4 seconds. It carried the lionfish across open water toward the mangroves, and she lost sight of it. For 20 years, we tried to force our way out of the lionfish invasion. We removed them by the tens of thousands, ate what we could, and the population kept growing. Nothing in the management plan accounted for what is actually beginning to work. A bacterial pathogen no one released, a bird no one trained, a predator guild we nearly destroyed and then, imperfectly, allowed to rebuild. The reefs were never going to be saved by spearfishers alone. If they are going to be saved, it will happen the same way every wetland, every forest, and every other recovery story like this one happened. By giving the native system enough time and enough protection to remember what to do. We did not restore the reef. We returned the animals that knew how and stepped back. If you are diving or fishing the Florida reefs, I want to hear from you. Are you seeing lionfish? Are you seeing fewer than 2 or 3 years ago? Tell me which reef. Tell me the depth. Tell me what you are watching. Divers know these waters before any government report does. Share this with someone who cares about what is happening out there. There are more stories like this one than you would imagine, and I have many more to tell you. I'm Tom Marsh. Thank you for watching.